Hello, this is Dr. Brandon again, and now I'm going to talk about uh, Marvin Minsky's views on artificial intelligence, and we're going to look at some of the material in the paper that we read by him. And let's start with the first quote that I have here. And what he's really interested in here is talking about consciousness and how one might develop a program in artificial intelligence to create consciousness. And so I'm going to start with this first quote here. This lecture will suggest some ideas about why computer programs are still so limited. Some thinkers might say that this is because computers have no consciousness and that nothing can be done about this, because it is in the nature of machines to only do what they are programmed to do, and therefore they cannot be programmed to think. This is a very common objection, right? Machines are just going to follow the program. But he thinks it is the real problem here is focusing on words like thinking and consciousness themselves, right? He's arguing that these words are vague and general and just too difficult to analyze to start with. So what you want to do is you want to start with kind of simpler processes to analyze, and then you want to figure out how you can kind of copy or mimic those processes. So if we just start with this idea of consciousness, we don't really understand what that means, and we're not going to make any progress. And we see that here when he talks about it. Here's what he says. However, here I will take an opposite view. Whenever some seemingly basic aspect of mind seems hard to explain, I will try to depict it as the product of some more complex network of processes whose activities may sometimes cooperate, but may also have ways to conflict and compete. Then in each of the examples below, a mystery that seemed inexplicable will then be replaced by a set of several different questions and problems, each of which may still be difficult, but at least won't seem so more intractable. We'll start by unpacking the set of phenomena for which we have come to use the word consciousness, right? So he's saying consciousness is not something simple, right? It's something incredibly complex. And you won't ever understand what consciousness means unless you can get into that complexity and understand all the little parts and how they all fit together. And he's going to show you kind of a way to think about this with this story about Joan. So Joan is partway across the street on the way to deliver her finished report. While thinking about what to say at the meeting, she hears a sound and turns her head and sees a quickly oncoming car. Uncertain whether to cross or retreat, but uneasy about arriving late, Joan decides to sprint across the road. She later remembers her injured knee and reflects upon her impulsive decision. If my knee had failed, I could have been killed. Then what would my friends have thought of me? And so he just takes this simple story about a decision, really, and he wants to show you all the different things going on in her mind, right? And likewise in her brain to engage in this behavior and make this decision. And so what he's talking about are these different mental phenomena, reaction, identification, characterization, and so on. And she has to do all these things very, very quickly to make this decision. And what he wants to argue is that if you were going to make an artificial intelligence, you'd want a machine that can do all of these things. And if you put all these things together in the right way, then you might have some consciousness and self-awareness. But don't aim to do that at first. Aim just to understand and copy or mimic these kinds of mental phenomena. And we can see this when he talks about the first one, reaction, right? Let me read some of this. Take the relatively simple phenomenon of reaction. How does Joan or anyone react to something? First, Joan must be filtering all her sense perceptions while crossing the street. If you're crossing the street, you're being bombarded with sense perceptions. You can't react to all of them, so you must filter them somehow to determine which ones to react to. And of course, you're not aware of this at all. This is going on in your mind, your brain, all the time. Second, some of these sense perceptions must be flagged for more focus and attention. So you're filtering, some will pop up as needing more attention, then you're going to focus on them and react to them. Again, all done subconsciously. Third, Joan's perceptions must be compared to past ones somehow. You won't know what to filter and flag if you don't bring in memory into the picture here. All of this and more must occur for Joan to react to a sound. So Minsky thinks that what you should do is you start with something like that. How can I make a machine that's going to react to a sound or to a sense perception? And of course, that's not a simple thing at all. That's immensely complex, but it's much less complex than consciousness itself. And here's his idea that really what's going on with consciousness is complex activities of big networks. So let me read this. This suggests that modern psychologists should consider taking an opposite view and reject the urge to base their ideas on discovering small sets of simple laws. Whenever some aspect of mind seems hard to explain, such as affection, fear, or pain, we could attempt instead to replace it by a more complex set of interconnected processes. In other words, we'll take each mental phenomenon and try to depict it not as so basic and elementary that it is inexplicable, but as resulting from the complex activities of big networks of different processes, which sometimes cooperate and sometimes compete. Then each mystery will begin to disappear because of having been replaced by several new kinds of problems. Each of those problems may still be quite hard, but because they are far less mysterious, we'll be able to start to deal with them. And so that's the idea. Instead of trying to figure out what are the laws of thought, what is consciousness itself, we'll look at all of these different mental phenomena. How do they work? How does someone react to something? How does somebody remember something? How does somebody identify something? How does somebody characterize something? How does somebody make a decision? Look at all of those processes, try to figure out how they work, try to make, and then reverse it and try to make a machine that can do some of those things. And so he thinks that would be a much better idea to both understand how the mind brain works and to try to create artificial intelligence. And so back to this idea of creating artificial intelligence, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to do a process of trial and error. You're going to try to make a machine that can react. It's not going to do it very well. Then you're going to try to perfect that. And you're going to encounter all kinds of difficulties and complexities. And you'll work through them and work through them over and over and over again with different systems, different combinations of subsystems, different kinds of hardware, different kinds of software. And you'll just keep trial and error until you have a system that can react to something, until you have a system that can identify something, until you have a system that can make a decision. And then you start to put them all together into larger combinations of systems. And that's how you might build an artificial intelligence. It would be something that would take a very long time, maybe hundreds of years, right? And lots of people working on lots and lots of different problems. It's not something that someone can just sit down and do in one evening. That's kind of his idea about artificial intelligence, is that people thought it was going to be easy and you could just do it, at once. But it's going to be a super, super long and very complex process involving lots and lots of different people working on lots and lots of different problems. So that's his idea about artificial intelligence overall.